She stepped into the grand hall of the Boston Conservatory of Music before the morning sunlight had a chance to fully spill through the soaring windows. The steady sound of wheels from a janitor's cart echoed softly across the marble-tiled floor, breaking the stillness of the vast space. Rachel Evans, 35, dressed in a silver-gray uniform worn thin at the cuffs, her hair pulled back in a low bun, quietly went about wiping down each piano she would never get to play. Her calloused fingers, shaped by years of labor, brushed gently across the glossy wood of the Steinway at the center of the hall. Part reverence, part regret. "Finished yet, Miss Evans?" came the voice of Mrs. Henderson, the elderly receptionist. From behind the front desk, her tone crackling like the old radiator behind her. "They're setting up for the Hamilton Krauss competition this afternoon. All prodigies. You best clear out before someone tells you off for standing where you don't belong." Rachel offered a faint smile. She'd grown used to remarks like that during her 3 years working here. Still, every time she wiped away the last trace of dust from a piano's surface, she lingered for a moment, silent, still, gazing at the black and white keys. And when she was sure no one was watching, Rachel would quietly sit on the long bench, never touching the instrument. She simply let her hands hover above the keyboard, eyes half closed, as if reaching for a memory buried long ago. Before we continue, with Rachel's extraordinary journey, if you too believe that a person's worth lies not in their title, uniform, or where they come from, but in their quiet resilience and steadfast talent that defies prejudice, then like and subscribe to this channel now so we can spread inspiring stories like this one to even more people. Now, let's return to the story that's about to unfold. When she was 7, her mother, a single parent, worked as a cleaner at a small church in the suburbs of Roxbury. After every service, while her mother swept the aisles, the old church pianist would often let Rachel sit at the worn piano. "You've got music in your blood, little one," he once said, squinting through his thick, scratched glasses. "That's not something you can teach." But then her mother fell ill, and whatever money they had went toward medication, leaving no room for piano lessons. The dream of music was folded up, tucked into the drawer of reality, replaced by bills and night shifts. Rachel still lingered like that, quietly, whenever her work was done. But that morning, as she drifted through the mist of old memories, a voice called out from the doorway, "I didn't know the cleaning staff here could play." Rachel startled and turned around. A young man in a security uniform stood there, smiling. His face was unfamiliar, gentle eyes, a kind expression. "Probably new, No," Rachel said quickly, standing up and smoothing her shirt. "I was just sitting for a moment." "It's all right," he said, raising a hand to reassure her. "I'm Liam. Just transferred here last week." He tilted his head, looking at her as if wanting to say more. "You know, the way you sat there, it looked like you belonged." Rachel hesitated. "I've never had formal training, and anyway, I'm not someone who's meant to sit in front of pianos like these." "And who exactly is meant to sit there?" Liam asked gently. It was a simple question, yet it caught in Rachel's throat. She had asked herself that same thing 100 times. Who gets to dream, to play, to walk onto a stage? "Did you know the Hamilton Krauss competition this year has one slot for an independent applicant?" Liam said, his eyes steady on hers. "The audition for that spot is tomorrow morning." Rachel laughed, and the sound echoed through the empty hall like a brief piano note. "You expect me to walk in there with my cleaning uniform, no sheet music, no name, competing against people who've been practicing since they were 3? And what's the worst that could happen?" Liam asked, a smile still on his lips. "Humiliation," Rachel said. "Laughter, and confirmation of what I've always feared, that I don't belong here." Liam nodded. Or the opposite. That afternoon, as Rachel left the conservatory, her work bag swaying at her side, she walked slower than usual along the street that led to her small apartment in South Boston. On each familiar step, Liam's words echoed somewhere in her mind, like a melody, without notes, only the rhythm of something long dormant, beginning to stir awake. The next morning, Rachel stepped into the grand hall of the conservatory earlier than usual. Her gray uniform had been carefully laundered the night before, and her hair was tied more neatly than on other days. She wasn't sure why she had come so early. Perhaps it was habit, or perhaps it was the unnamed restlessness stirring in her chest. At the end of the hallway, the door to the concert hall stood slightly ajar. Inside, preparations were underway for the audition to select an independent contestant for the Hamilton Krause competition. The soft amber glow from the chandelier reflected off the polished wooden floor, shimmering like a dream just out of reach. Rachel stood still behind her janitor's cart, watching as the others arrived, dressed in suits, simple yet elegant black dresses, carrying sheet music folders or high-end leather cases. No one noticed the woman with the facilities team badge pinned to her chest. Their conversations floated with words like Juilliard, Berkeley, Mozart, Beethoven, spoken in the fluent cadence of those who belonged to the world of classical music. Rachel stepped back, as if her very presence had fallen out of rhythm with the room. "You came," said Liam's voice beside her, making her start. He held a stack of papers and 2 cups of hot coffee. "I brought an application form, just in case you changed your mind." Before Rachel could respond, a tall woman with cropped silver hair entered the room, trailed by 3 men and 2 other women as if escorting royalty. No introduction was needed. Rachel recognized her instantly. Eleanor Hargrove, head judge, a living icon of American classical music. Eleanor's gaze swept the room and paused briefly on Rachel's janitor cart in the corner. There was no displeasure, but also no acknowledgement. Just invisibility. "This is your last chance," Liam whispered, placing the application on a small table near the audition entrance. "They're only taking 20. I counted. There are only 17 so far." Rachel looked at the form, then at the Steinway in the center of the hall. She had no sheet music prepared, no composition draft, no sponsor, no invitation. But her hands, those hands had touched countless keys, though never once had she heard her own playing in a space meant for music to truly be heard. "Are you actually going to sign that?" came another voice. A young contestant, hair slicked, Guri wearing a crisp white shirt buttoned to the collar, looked at Rachel as if she were standing in the wrong place. "Once you're done cleaning, you might want to check the plumbing downstairs. The restrooms near the hall are leaking." Soft laughter rippled through the nearby group. Rachel tightened her grip on the form. She said nothing, only reached for the pen and signed her name, the strokes firm, slanted, like the years that had shaped her. The registration attendant glanced at Rachel's uniform with visible confusion. "You don't have sheet music? We require each contestant to bring 2 printed copies." "My piece is original," Rachel replied, her voice soft but steady. "I composed it myself." The attendant blinked, then marked the final box on the list. "You'll go last." Rachel nodded and stepped to the back of the seating row. As she sat down, the stares from the other contestants followed her. Some shook their heads. A few whispered among themselves. But their voices faded. Rachel no longer heard what they were saying. In her mind, a piano began to play, slowly, from deep within memory. It was the same piece she had played at age 10, the first time her mother took her to try the library piano, where she first discovered she could tell a story without using words. Liam sat quietly by the door nearby, saying nothing. He simply looked at Rachel with a calm, unwavering trust. And in that dazzling room filled with promise and pressure, there sat one woman in a gray uniform, clutching an application form, bearing the fragile yet fierce hope signed by the very hands that had long forgotten what it meant to believe she had the right to dream. The concert hall had grown noticeably quieter as the auditions neared their final rounds. Rachel sat in the last row of seats, silently watching each person emerge from the grand mahogany doors at the far end of the hall. Some contestants walked, out beaming, others bit their lips and hurried away, avoiding eye contact. She didn't ask who had passed, nor did she care to look at the scores. Her hands were tightly clasped, palms beginning to sweat. One male contestant, the same one who had sneered at her that morning, strode out looking smug, collar neatly straightened. his gait brisk like someone already envisioning the stage at Carnegie Hall. "Ms. Hargrove said my performance had emotional depth," he announced loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I'm definitely in the top group." Then came her name, clear and sharp through the intercom. "Rachel Evans, please come in." She stood, her legs barely feeling the floor beneath her feet, all eyes turned toward her. A cleaning lady. No sheet music, no accompanist, no reputation. Only a name that had just been called, and a pair of trembling hands opening the door to the room where 3 judges waited. The audition room was small, only half the size of the main stage, yet everything inside seemed magnified. The creak of the wooden floor beneath her shoes, the overhead light spotlighting the Steinway at the center, the regal posture of Eleanor Hargrove as she squinted at Rachel's approach, all of it formed a stage set for exposing misplacement. "Rachel Evans," Eleanor repeated, flipping a page in the thin stack of forms. "Your application says you work on the janitorial staff at the Conservatory?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you'll be performing an original composition?" "Yes." Eleanor glanced at the 2 judges beside her. The salt and pepper-haired man adjusted his glasses on his nose. The woman gave a small nod, looking vaguely disinterested. None of them smiled. Rachel moved toward the Steinway, but Eleanor raised a hand. "One moment. I believe the Steinway isn't quite suited for today's kind of performance." She looked toward the far end of the room, where an old upright piano stood against the wall, its wood chipped, keys yellowed and uneven from age and neglect. "That one would be more appropriate for an unconventional audition," Eleanor said sweetly, the sugar in her voice barely veiling the edge beneath. The male judge looked like he was about to object, but fell silent at a glance from Eleanor. Rachel paused. The looks from the room had shifted, from curiosity to pity, but she didn't argue. She turned and walked toward the old piano with a back that did not bow. The bench creaked as she sat down. The keys were rough, slow to respond, and the middle C was off by a half tone. Eleanor cleared her throat from the judging panel. "If the instrument is too difficult to play, you may end your audition." Rachel looked up at the panel, her eyes no longer uncertain. "I'm used to imperfect things," she said simply. She placed her hands on the keyboard, and her breath slowed. Behind those worn, discolored keys was a world no one in this room had ever seen, a world where a little girl once played alone in a quiet church, her mother listening between the scent of disinfectant and a weak cough. She began to play. The first sound didn't emerge like a grand overture, but like a story whispered by the wind. Slow, raw, but carrying something unusual, an emotion so genuine it made the listener forget the tuning flaws. Her left hand kept rhythm like a heartbeat, steady and grounded. Her right hand carried the melody, not performing but conversing with the piano, a dialogue between 2 beings long forgotten by the world. At the judges' table, Eleanor initially tilted her head in performative interest, but soon her brow tightened, her face grew rigid. This was no amateur improvisation, this was composition, with structure, with depth, with soul. The female judge stopped writing, her pen suspended in midair. The man removed his glasses, watching without blinking. And in the audience, those who had once laughed were now utterly silent. Rachel Evans, the woman whose hands usually gripped rags and mop buckets, was transforming a broken piano into an instrument of true performance. And as she reached the final bars of her piece, the audition room fell into a silence that no title or degree could ever command. Only true talent can make a room go quiet like that. When the final chord faded, no one in the small room dared to move. The entire panel of judges, the few remaining contestants, even the technical staff standing behind the curtains, all seemed pinned in place by what they had just witnessed. Rachel still sat there, her hands gently lifted from the keys, her pinky finger trembling slightly from emotion. Yet her face was remarkably calm, no gesture seeking approval, no trace of pride. She simply looked straight ahead, as if she had finally done what she came to do. The first sound to break the silence was a single clap, hesitant, soft, coming from the corner of the room, where a silver-haired professor, long known for his cautious judgments had risen to his feet. That single clap was quickly joined by others, gathering like rain tapping on glass, swelling into a wave of applause, louder, fuller, until it erupted into a thunderous ovation never before heard at an audition round. Some even rose from their seats, eyes glistening. No one remembered this was just a tryout for a wild card slot. No one saw the janitor's uniform as out of place anymore. All they saw was music, and the woman who brought it to life. The male judge removed his glasses, still staring at the old piano like he'd just witnessed a miracle. The woman beside him let out a soft gasp she couldn't hold back. She just did the impossible. And Eleanor Hargrove, the one who had coldly judged generations of musicians, sat frozen, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. No one laughed, no one sneered, and no one dared to break the silence with a careless word. Rachel slowly stood and bowed deeply, a gesture of both humility and pride. But as she turned to leave, Eleanor rose to her feet. Her eyes met Rachel's, and in that instant something in her shifted. She walked toward the piano, not with sarcasm, nor with the guarded gaze of a seasoned judge. She stood across from Rachel, silent for a beat longer than necessary, then spoke, low but clear. "Ms. Evans, I used to believe that music required discipline, pedigree, and the right upbringing. But today, my own ears have proven me wrong. True talent chooses no birthplace. You brought this broken piano back to life and made all of us look inward." The room was thick with emotion. Rachel looked up, said nothing. Eleanor slowly extended her hand. "We don't need further deliberation. With unanimous consent from the panel, Rachel Evans, you are our chosen finalist for this year's competition." No one objected. No one could. Another round of applause burst forth, this time with voices of congratulations echoing in every corner. But amid the commotion, Rachel quietly walked off toward the wings, where Liam was waiting with a grin stretching from ear to ear. He raised both arms like he was ready to hug the world, eyes alight. "I told you! You did it!" Rachel let out a soft laugh, her eyes shimmering with emotions long trained to stay hidden. "I still can't believe it," she said, voice catching in her throat. "I just did what I always do. Only this time, not in the dark." Liam nodded. "Today was the day the light found you." From afar, Eleanor continued watching them, her expression no longer that of a gatekeeper, but of an artist who had just witnessed something sacred. She turned to the stage manager and signaled for an urgent meeting of the organizing committee. As for Rachel, everything still spun in her mind. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time after years of hiding, she had stepped into the light not by permission, not by invitation, but by her own hands and her own music. 1 week later, Rachel stood in the grand atrium of the Boston Conservatory in a simple black dress, her hair neatly pinned back as always. There was no apron, no cleaning cart in sight. In front of her was the stage for the Steinberg final performance, A.E., space reserved for recognized artists, for those invited to perform, not hired to clean after the lights had gone dark. The audience seats had filled early. Reporters, music critics, students, professors, and even high-ranking figures from the academic elite were present. Some whispered, "That's her, the one the judges stood for." Others remained skeptical. It was just the surprise factor. But no one left. After what happened at the audition, no one dared walk out when Rachel Evans was about to perform. Backstage, Eleanor Hargrove appeared with a printed copy of Rachel's composition, transcribed from memory, and gently placed it on the piano stand. "I haven't changed anything," she said softly. "Just added the time signature and your name at the top. It deserves ink, not just memory." Rachel nodded, her heart full, not of nerves, but something new. The quiet realization that, for the first time, she was being seen as a real artist. No more hiding, no more needing to prove. As the spotlight warmed the center stage, Rachel walked out to a gentle but expectant round of applause. She took her seat at the Steinway Grand. This time, no one asked her to switch to the old one. She placed her hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and began. The music rose like a story being retold. Not loud, not flashy, but so honest it made the heart pause. Each note held a piece of her life. A cramped kitchen. Silent evenings cleaning. The auditorium. Hands aching but still reaching for an old, dusty dream. She wasn't playing for a prize. She wasn't playing to prove anyone wrong. She was playing because she had something to say. And finally, the world was ready to listen. When the performance ended, the auditorium erupted. No one cared how many years of formal training she'd had. No one asked whether she'd studied theory or mastered technique. They only knew one thing. They had just been moved, deeply, wordlessly, by something pure and true. At the reception afterward, Rachel stood by a tall window, a glass of water in hand, quietly watching the city glow in the distance. Liam approached, silent at first, then handed her a small envelope. Invitation. From the Harriet Hall Music Fund, he said. They want to sponsor your first published piece. Rachel laughed, her voice hoarse with emotion. It's been so long since I even dared to think about the words first piece. Liam shrugged. Then now is the time to start. Eleanor joined them, not as a judge or legend of classical music, but simply as someone who had once been wrong. I hope we'll be hearing much more from Rachel Evans. Rachel met her eyes, this time without defense. Thank you for giving me a chance, and for the old piano. Eleanor nodded, a faint smile on her lips. Sometimes it's the imperfect things that make music feel the most real. The night drew to a close, but Rachel's journey was just beginning. No more cleaning in silence. No more melodies kept hidden. From now on, she would step onto the stage, not needing permission, not waiting for the door to open, because the world had heard her music, and it would want to hear more. You've just witnessed an extraordinary journey, one where a simple woman once overlooked for her apron and dust-covered hands made an entire music world rise to its feet through nothing but raw talent and quiet courage. Rachel Evans's story isn't just a personal triumph. It's a reminder to all of us. True talent doesn't require a grand background, a shiny title, or a formal invitation. It only needs a chance, and someone brave enough to take it. Have you ever stayed silent out of fear of being judged? Given up on a dream because you thought you didn't qualify? Remember, sometimes all it takes is for you to step forward, even with trembling hands and a doubting heart, to change how the world sees you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever met a Rachel in real life? Or maybe you are one. We'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that true worth isn't in appearance or status, but in the way we dare to live with honesty, talent, and heart. And if you want to keep following stories that inspire, empower, and awaken something within, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story might be exactly what you need to hear to change your own. And always remember, the most beautiful music doesn't need to be played on a Steinway, only with the truest part of your soul. See you in the next story, where another ordinary soul will do something no one thought possible.